I better figure out how to get out of this arm bar.
Right.
I don't have time to sit here and think, man, I shouldn't have moved this way. I should have moved the other way because now I'm tapping.
Yep.
And so being able to adapt, again, it requires a certain mindset, a certain mentality. It's the whole premise of second plan A, right? It's I can't focus on what was the best plan of action for 10 minutes ago. I have to focus on what's the best plan of action for right now.
Welcome to the Second Plan A podcast, where we take hard-earned lessons from the mat and convert them into tools for navigating life's challenges. I'm Amber Hoover. I'd rather stick to the plan.
I'm Ryan Hoover, and I'm pretty sure there is no plan.
All of the plans went out the window today. So today we are moving on to our second, third, fourth, fifth Plan A.
There is 0% chance this will be a good podcast because we have run into every roadblock possible just to get to this point. So
it's going to be great, though. Those are always the ones. They come out of nowhere. They surprise you. On this episode, we explore why people double down on beliefs that no longer serve them. We are throwing hands with everyone from doomsday cults to your keyboard warrior coaches as we look at the psychology of commitment, the cost of sacrifice, and the courage it takes to change course. Fighter, are you ready?
What is wrong with you?
The same thing that was wrong with me 2 weeks ago. Okay. It's December 1954. The Seekers.
I'm pretty sure that's not accurate.
Not in the story. The Seekers, a UFO cult led by Dorothy Martin, are waiting for aliens to come down and save them from a cataclysmic flood that will end life on Earth.
I'm also waiting for this.
Fair. Listen, I'm fascinated by cults, and I had to resist a lot of rabbit holes to actually get this outline done, but I still snuck this one in. And you might be wondering why. Well, that's because this cult was infiltrated by psychologist Leon Festinger. Do you know this story? Do you know the cult?
No, but it sounds like the Heaven's Gate people.
Very, very similar.
Marshall Applewhite.
And also very
Applegate,
different.
Something.
Oh, man.
I can see him. Bald-headed dude, very strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, similar kind of idea.
So when I was trying to get all the details on this, there were a bunch of different cult leaders mentioned. Dorothy Martin just seemed the one that was most mentioned, but there's a little bit of debate, it sounds like. But anyway, let's put a pause on cult. I know you're on the edge of your chairs right now. Let's focus on Festinger. He's a psychologist at the University of Minnesota at the time.
What word are you saying there?
Psychologist?
No, I got that
Festinger.
one. Say it again.
Festinger.
Spell it.
Festinger.
Okay.
Festinger?
I have no idea.
I don't know. I don't know. I didn't
know what language you were speaking.
It took me so long to get the letters in the right order. I kind of didn't care about the emphasis.
Okay.
Anyway, so he had already spent a decade at this point studying social behavior and communication, which almost happened by accident. He was doing a study for satisfaction of university housing, and he started seeing correlation and relationships between degrees of friendship created based on similarity of opinions, essentially. And so by the time he chose to infiltrate this cult, he already understood humans' innate drive to validate their own opinions with others. And we've talked about that a good bit on the show, and how even though social media should expand our worlds, it just strengthens our echo chambers and our small subsets of people. So he already had these ideas in terms of what it would look like when the prophecies of this cult did or didn't happen. So back to our cult friends. There are differing reports on what time the UFO was supposed to land to get these people. I can't believe I'm talking about this in the podcast. This is so much fun. Okay. As each marker passed, though, 4 p.m. hits, nothing. Midnight hits, nothing. 4 a.m., no aliens anywhere. The less devout followers just picked up and headed out.
Clearly they were on alien time.
Obviously. So I immediately thought, oh man, the first thing they're going to say is they read the calendar wrong, or they should have used Greek or Roman, all that kind of stuff, right? Anyway, less devout followers are gone. They're like, whatever. Everyone else is sitting there waiting. They all gave up so much in the name of this belief. They quit jobs, said goodbye to loved ones, gave away possessions, money, property, everything. And one of the most fervent members was actually a doctor. I don't know how to say his last name either. Lafhead,
Well, that didn't stop you from the last
Dr.
one.
Charles something. The leader called him Dr. Armstrong, which I can say. So we're going to go with that. He said, I've given up just about everything. I've cut every tie. I've burned every bridge. I've turned my back on the world. I can't afford to doubt. Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Strong sentence right there. So by 4 a.m., they had a new
Welcome
story.
to Krav Maga.
Hey, wonder if this is going to connect. Let's find out. By 4 a.m., they had a new story to celebrate. Once Martin received word that their faith and loyalty led to the divine intervention, sparing the entire planet from this flood. How's that?
Brilliant.
So, just as a recap, made up a prophecy. Prophecy didn't happen. They used the fact that it didn't happen to prove the prophecy was real.
It's brilliant.
I mean, it doesn't get much better than that.
It's I see this happening in real time on a daily basis in this country.
That's why I wanted this door open. So by all means, charge right through it, please.
So first of all, like, I don't know the actual definition of a cult, but I think probably if we defined it pretty loosely, we would
Almost
find
anything
that,
and everything.
yeah, and pretty much all of us are attached to at least one.
Easily.
So without getting too much into that, clearly there are degrees, just like anything else. There are levels to this stuff. I think in our current political climate, you see this with good regularity. Especially, you mentioned social media. Things that were supposed to happen that didn't happen, and all of a sudden the justification for why it didn't happen, and just like what happened here, how it not happening the way they said it was going to happen was even better
Proof
than it's kind of wild, the mental gymnastics that we will do as humans to protect an idea or concept, a philosophy. And I really don't think it's about protecting the idea, the concept, the philosophy. It's about protecting ourselves. It's about us not being okay with admitting that a thing that not only we believe so fervently in, but we defended and proselytized so fervently, and then to go back on that is painful. It's something that we have to kind of like internalize first, which that's really hard to do, and then we have to externalize it, and by doing so, we're saying, hey, I know I was super passionate about this, and I was telling you how this is the best thing ever and whatever, and now I have to say I was wrong.
Yeah.
Man, is that hard to do.
Festinger, whichever. He's the psychologist that developed the theory of cognitive dissonance. And so he expected that when the aliens didn't come, if the aliens didn't come, give them a little bit of credence, that
listen, they still have time.
Sure. That it wasn't, they wouldn't just backtrack and go back on their beliefs and be like, oh, okay, we were wrong. Like, let's go back to our lives.
Yeah.
That they would find something to double down on. And he noticed that the more you commit, the more you've invested into this belief, the harder it is to backtrack, and you start making up whatever it is to deal with that dissonance. Because there are two ways to deal with the dissonance. You drop your belief, like, okay, here's the proof, here's the evidence, there we go.
Yep.
Which is difficult. We're talking about changing your identity, dropping your ego. And yeah, if you have, especially nowadays, social proof that you believe this other thing, really difficult to do. Or you change what's happening, you alter reality to make it fit your narrative. And that's what the majority of this cult did.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
initially,
what you see on social a lot of times is somebody will say a thing, and then somebody will scroll back on their feed 6 years ago and find where they said something that is maybe contrary to that thing.
Yeah.
And so people are super reticent to outwardly change how they feel and how they believe, which for me, like, I don't want to go back 6 years and see that I was thinking the exact same way. Yeah. Like, I feel like that's the failing, but we're so indoctrinated to believe that we have to hold fast to the things that either we've grown up with, or we've developed over time, and then we've championed, and you can't go back on it. Like I assume pretty much anybody that's listening to this knows, that we're pretty close on this new book, The Incomplete Guide to Modern Krav Maga. And I haven't seen this video, and I don't know who did it or what, but somebody messaged me yesterday or day before that a Krav Maga guy had put out a video that says there's no such thing as modern Krav Maga. And my response to that was, well, good. I'm glad they're finally admitting the problem. I think when you feel like something is attacking your belief, your philosophy, instead of listening to the thing, you just immediately go to protect mode. Because that's the known, that's what's comfortable. That's the easy thing. It's hard. It's really hard to listen to an opposing opinion, give real credence to it, and then evaluate it against what you have believed in for 5 years, 10 years, your whole life, whatever, maybe spent money on, spent time away from your family on, and then to go back and say, oh, you know what? Maybe I was wrong. That sucks, man. How do I know? Because I've done it, I've probably done it many times. And so I totally understand how this happens.
Well, this is a continuation from the unlearning episode.
Yeah.
That's the hard part, is unlearning, changing your whole identity, accepting a new reality, and knowing that people are going to be like, well, that's not what you said before.
Right. Well, and I think part of the problem is we attach these thoughts, feelings, beliefs, philosophies, whatever, as our identity, and they're really not. They're a piece of who we are, but they're not who we are.
Right.
My beliefs in whatever should not be my overarching identity. Just because it could be whatever. It could be a political party. It could be a religion. It could be a martial art, whatever. That's not who I am.
Right.
And so I should be able to critically think about these things and evaluate where I am today. The whole no man ever steps into the same river twice kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's not the same river. I'm not the same man, is the way it should be. Right. But for whatever reason, we've allowed ourselves to believe that somehow that is the failing, as opposed to the failing being that I'm not evolving, that I'm not willing to change, that I'm not willing to look at new information and consider it versus what I believe.
We do seem to put a high value on consistency.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's stress, anxiety levels, like wanting to know, okay, this is who this is. I can put them in this box. I understand them and what they are and who they are and what they believe.
Right.
And you can like check it off the list. Similar to how we were talking about this recently, the studies are showing people watch the same shows over and over again to reduce anxiety, and what's going to happen, and the scene, and it's very comfortable. And that's okay when you're, doing work, writing a book with something in the background, whatever it is. But the life isn't like that. Right. Life isn't consistent. People aren't consistent.
No. If you use the TV show and the writing the book example, and we've talked about kind of multitasking before and how that's not a real thing, the way that people generally mean it. If I'm writing a book and I like certain types of noise in the background, certain types. If it's a show that, or a movie or whatever that I've never seen before, my attention is not going to be able to focus on the work.
Same.
It's going to be drawn to the new stimulus.
Yeah.
So having that level of comfortability in the background where I kind of know what's happening, it's background noise, but it's not distracting.
It's not taking my attention away. Yeah.
Yeah.
It almost becomes just white noise.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I understand how hearing the familiar is comfortable. It doesn't really challenge me. It doesn't really force me to think. And for better or worse, I think most people don't want to think.
No.
And I get it. The whole ignorance is bliss kind of thing. There's a lot to that. If you spend all of your days worrying about all of the things, there's going to be no bliss there. So I understand finding those refuges, but it's like anything. If you run to one extreme or the other, life's mostly in the gray, and we're going to miss out on a lot, I think.
Yeah. When you were talking about politics and beliefs and things like that, it made me think about people who are diehard on celebrities, like really love any one person, and you really find out how much they've invested into their identity as somebody who follows this person, whatever it might be, if something negative comes up in the media. Because now all of a sudden they have excuses or reasons or responses for it, right? Rather than just, if I don't have a huge investment, like, oh, well, that sucks, moving on, kind of thing.
Well, and on that vein, like, also, you see that a lot of people can't separate the art from the artist.
Yes.
Like I can watch a thing from somebody that I don't like personally align with when it comes to politics or philosophy or religion or whatever.
Right.
But I can watch the thing because they're a good artist, or I can listen to their music or whatever,
Right.
I'm not trying to listen to Kid Rock for the rest of my life because supposedly he maybe aligns with some certain kind of political viewpoint. Like I don't need that. I can separate the art from the artist. But again, I get how it makes it a whole lot easier just to say, they think this, I think that, I'm going to push them off to the side, and it's going to make me feel more comfortable supporting, my side.
Yeah.
And the whole my side thing, I think that has created more problems for us in this country than just about anything, we are doing way more damage internally to us as a nation than I think any external force could do.
We really do. Like, the US does need some time for just introspective, like, focus on us kind of time.
Yeah. But
can't pour from an empty cup. Oh, people don't like to think. That was the end of the sentence. You're right.
Yeah.
No, yeah, it's absolutely true.
So introspection is going to be hard to come by.
We're coming up now against stubbornness versus adaptability. And we see a lot of stubbornness in drawing lines, putting each other into boxes, deciding your beliefs and aligning on that front. And either if I have a belief, somebody else believes something differently, I either try to draw that person towards me, make them more conform towards me, whether it's literally trying to change what you think or kind of making excuses in my head. Well, he said this, but what he really meant was, or the context of it wasn't, kind of making excuses to mentally, in my mind, pull you to me.
Yeah.
Or I could adapt, consider, and look to change course. So I'm going to use an example that's going to make you go to sleep, but that's okay because I'm counting on you guys, the listeners, to stay with me.
That's why I have the tea.
Two leading economists.
Ugh, I'm out.
In the early 1900s.
Oh my God.
Andrew Fisher and John Maynard Keynes. Most people know Keynes, Keynesian economics, very common, very popular. They both have a very similar story. Similar things happened to them. One died relatively unknown and almost shamed in the economics world. And then the other one was glorified, and his name is still written throughout history. And it came down to adaptability. Right before the Great Depression, neither economist saw it coming. Andrew Fisher went as far as to say that stocks had reached a permanently high plateau. He lost everything in the crash, didn't recover, hardly, was blamed for it here in the US. Keynes did not make that big quote, which saying something is permanent, crazy. Okay, moving on.
I literally made a post yesterday that said everything is temporary.
There it is. Just,
hopefully like this story.
So Keynes didn't see it coming. I got plenty of time. Actually, that is a huge timer.
I know,
You're in trouble.
I know,
you regret it now, don't you?
This was a mistake.
So Keynes also had a lot of money tied up into stocks. Crash happened. He wasn't well off. Like, he lost, I think, 80% of his income, but he adapted his investing strategy, moved forward, changed what he was doing, and he had already once before lost everything and had to start again. So he was ready to pick up, change, and go through. Fisher had never experienced that before. He had spent all this time gathering a bunch of wealth. Crash hit, lost it all, in debt to a lot of people. His name was being dragged through the mud. And so a lot of things went poorly for him, despite both of them being great in their time and recognized as some of the greatest thinkers. Anyway, this is a story about adaptability. Keynes adapted. He's remembered throughout history. We literally have named a whole economics side branch theory thought process after him. Fisher, relatively unknown. You should adapt. When the situation changes, you change. Something like that. I don't know. Time. I still got plenty more time to go. That was as short as I could make that. It wasn't terrible. It was that much sand.
I don't know why this is in here. There's all kinds of crap in here that we don't really understand.
But apparently that one had purpose. It worked.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Sort of. It needs to be way smaller.
I sped through it.
Yeah. So there's a couple things there. Not that I was really listening or paying attention, but I got a little nugget here and there.
I'm such a nerd. I can't help it.
Oh my God, you're such a dork. Is there a difference between a dork and a nerd?
Yes.
Okay. You want to explain it to me?
Flip the timer again.
No. So at one point you said something about Keynes had already lost everything one time.
Yep.
And Fisher had not. Did I get the names right?
You did.
Okay.
Well done.
I think that's a big deal.
I think there's so much to that.
Because everybody is, and we've kind of touched on this before, we all look at what's in front of us through our filter, right? Which is driven by our experiences. And so in our training, we talk about points of reference and moving from familiar to familiar, right? So for one of these guys, this was familiar.
Yep.
He'd seen it before. He'd done it before. He knew how to get out of it.
Yep.
For the other guy, this was brand new territory. And not only is it new to him, but the other thing I heard you say was he was kind of getting drugged through the mud. Yep. So with that, I was talking to Eli Knight yesterday or day before, I can't remember. And he gave me a quote from Rick and Morty that I'm not going to get exactly right, but the quote was basically, I've seen what you people cheer for, so I'm not going to be bothered by your boos. That's not exactly it, but that's close enough.
Sure.
You get the idea. And so the point is, I don't, the only value your boos have is what I attach to them. Yeah. Right. And we kind of touched on this before where, if I wouldn't take your advice, why would I take your criticism? Yeah. And so a lot of this has to do with, adaptability, being able to see the circumstances as they are, where we are in this moment in time, and adjust to that, as opposed to dwelling on what happened, what I should have done, what I could have done, what I might have done. Yeah. None of that shit matters, you know. There might be a time and place for us to revisit it, know, and kind of
Monday morning quarterback.
Yes.
It. Yeah.
After action report, whatever. But right now, I gotta go. Yeah. Yeah. It's like in a roll round, I might, after the fact, sit back and think, well, why did I almost get caught in that arm bar? Why did I get caught in that arm bar or whatever? But in the moment, I better figure out how to get out of this arm bar. Right. I don't have time to sit here and think, man, I shouldn't have moved this way. I should have moved the other way because now I'm tapping. Yep. And so being able to adapt, again, it requires a certain mindset, a certain mentality. It's the whole premise of second plan A, right? It's I can't focus on what was the best plan of action for 10 minutes ago. I have to focus on what's the best plan of action for right now. Yeah. And that requires a short memory sometimes. It requires a confidence that you're going to figure it out. It's going to be okay. Because the other thing that will happen is if I just dwell on the past, if I just dwell on why I've ended up in this place,
there's no moving forward.
No. But again, I get why it happens. We as humans have this tendency to perseverate on things we can't control. Mm-hmm. And we spend a lot of time and energy and effort on things we can't control, while the things we
can control are sitting right there staring at us.
Putting no energy, no time, no resources into what we can actually control, because I think it's more comfortable to spend time and talk about and post about things that we can't actually affect because there's no consequence.
I just taught a session with a group of third graders. They actually did really well. I was impressed. Probably the best group of 8-9-year-olds I've ever taught, for sure. Anyway, the goal from the teacher side while it was a self-defense session, was primarily on helping give them tools to prepare them for exams next week, their end of year assessments, that kind of thing. And so we talked a lot about facing your problems, going all in, the worry and stress and anxiety that comes with doing something new, getting in front of the group right now, doing this strange things is also similar to the worry and stress anxiety you might feel going into an exam, and talking about the internal dialogue around it, how to best prepare, all of those different things. And it is so easy to focus on an emotion because emotions are real. They're a thing. But next you have to decide what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm stressed over this exam, there's no action in that. And yet we still want to just sit there and stress when we could either do something actionable about it, go study, or decide that we've studied as much as we can and it's going to be what it is. And that's what I tell myself. I studied as best as I can. I know as much as I can know. I'm going to go in and do my best.
Yeah.
There's no reason to stress about it. And yet we spend so much of our lives.
Some
of us spend so much of our lives. Takes a village, man, to raise me.
You ain't kidding. And we've kind of touched on this before. I think a lot of this is just personality type, right? Yeah. People that are entrepreneurial by nature or nurture, however that happens, recognize that this is just kind of how things are, and it's like the everything is temporary kind of thing. Mm-hmm. As soon as you can come to that realization, life gets a whole lot easier. When you think that this person will always be there, this institution will always be there, this organization will always be there, this whatever will always be there, you're going to be in for a perpetual hamster wheel of disappointment, because
that's the next shirt.
But it's true. Like,
oh no, it absolutely is. Yeah.
There is no permanence in the world, and so
the problem is we take the present moment and think of it as permanent.
Yeah.
And that's what gets you caught up. For me, it's a lot more in sparring than rolling, where somebody hits me and it's like, I can't get my strikes in. This guy's getting his strikes in. I can't do this. I suck. Like, and it's that snowball effect. And if I do let it get away from me and forget to reframe and continue to focus on the goals of what we're doing,
right,
that's my perpetual hamster wheel of disappointment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the idea of temporary impermanence, it plays into this conversation that we're having about adaptability and the idea of being so attached to a mm-hmm. group, organization, political party, whatever
belief,
that we adhere to this permanence, and as soon as we do that, we have no ability to shift, to adapt, to navigate. I don't want to be identified as this party, this organization, this group, this martial art, whatever, because I recognize that things are temporary. It's mm-hmm. not the same river, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not the same person. That the permanence that we seek because we feel like there's comfort there, right?
Right.
If I can say, well, this just is, and it's always gonna be, then I don't have to think about it, right? There's nothing to think about. Yep. I can just defend it.
Yep.
And so if we can't get past that, then it's going to be really difficult to have any sort of growth, whether it's physical growth, mental growth, emotional growth, whatever. Everything is temporary. Everything. People don't like that because it's scary.
Yeah. No, it's true. In terms of temporary and permanent, I'm going to switch the conversation a little bit over to the concept of the dip. How do you say his name? Before I mess it up right from the jump.
Fistinger?
No.
I know who you're talking about. Godin.
Thank you.
But that may not be right.
Okay.
That's how it looks to me, but it may not be right.
So Seth Godin, just to have some uniformity.
Somebody will tell us that
eventually.
It's wrong.
In the dip, the whole book, it's like less than 100 pages, but it's deciding when to push through and when to quit.
It's still the whole book.
It is the whole
book. Doesn't matter. If it was 4 pages, it would still be the whole book.
Sure. The little book that helps you decide when to stick and when to quit. It's a great book.
The whole thing?
The whole thing. So he argues, and situations apply, context, whatever, giant asterisk. If you're going to quit when it gets hard, you may as well not start. You may as well quit from the get-go.
Yeah.
And I think that's valuable, not wasting your time.
Yeah.
I think it's nearly impossible to really know if you're going to quit when something gets hard or not.
Yeah.
For certain things. But what I was immediately thinking about was BJJ and the Blue Belt Blues. And it's like, well, if you think you're going to get a year into this and you're just going to be like, I'm done, maybe you don't even start.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about tools for debating that too. If you're listening right now and you're like, well, I'm just going to quit jujitsu, hold on. Wait 1 second. My answer is to skip blue belt. We put people straight from white to purple. We make them stay white for 3, 4, 5 years, give them a purple belt, have the internet lose their mind on us.
Yeah.
And then move on.
Which, anyway, again, I've seen what makes you people cheer.
I don't care.
I'm unbothered by your booze. So the thing that I immediately thought of was years ago, probably 12 years or more ago, I was running one of the Hard Ready programs, the 12-week program. And one of our members' husband wanted to do it. He was not a member. He wanted to do it. And I said, it's really for members only, and he sent me this really long email.
Which he loves, by the way.
Yeah, it was my favorite. And it was basically like, look, man, I really need this. I promise you I'll stick with it. I understand that it's very demanding. And that's why I was only available to members, because I needed people to understand how physically and emotionally taxing it of a program it is. And, there are things that you're going to do necessarily that you're not going to want to do. Anyway, this whole email about how, he really needed it. He would stick it out, blah, 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 whatever. Week 2, I never saw him again. And so...
Man, week 2?
Week 2, yeah.
It hadn't even gotten hard yet.
No. We were just onboarding, really. It's the on-ramp kind of process. And so, yeah, I totally get that. If your overarching kind of precedent that you've set is, as soon as something gets hard, I'm peacing out. Stop wasting people's time.
Yep.
Don't waste my time.
Yep.
Like, don't waste my energy. Don't take a slot from somebody else.
Yep.
Whatever it is. Or suck it the fuck up and stop being a little bitch and do the work. Like, at some point you got to do one or the other. Stop doing shit.
Yep.
Or commit and change. The next, because whether it's winning, losing, starting, stopping, quitting, whatever, these things set
habits.
A precedent. Yeah. And it becomes a habit. And like you were talking about the third graders, one of the things that I try to kind of instill in my kids' classes is, if they can do these hard things now, whether it's getting in front of a class and doing a demonstration, getting in front of a class, I will have kids, like, I'll teach a thing and then I'll say, all right, who can walk me through the steps?
Yep.
And if they can do that at 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, and they can tell their partner that they're going too hard or whatever it is, then, man, life gets so much easier as actual life gets hard. Because when you're an 8 or 9 year old, life is not hard.
No,
like
you think it is, but
now there are definitely 8 and 9 year olds out there that have very difficult existences. But generally speaking,
you do what you're told when you're told to do it, and that's all
you're not really making choices or decisions, and that's where things get hard, get difficult. And so if you can learn to do that at a very early age through doing relative hard things, then it establishes this kind of precedent for success.
I love seeing a kid do the right technique at the right time and the way it was taught and that sort of thing. But I really love walking by a group and hearing them communicating about what they need in this drill, what the expectation is, what you're supposed to be doing or what they're supposed to be doing, and working together to figure it out, rather than just, well, you're not doing the right thing, I'm just going to keep punching you because that's my job. And so when they can really look outside of themselves and influence their environment, and they're willing to speak up to influence their environment, that's incredible. To be
Yes.
doing that at 8 or 9, yeah.
And those are kids that are much less likely to become attached to a cult,
Yeah.
a philosophy, a political ideation that becomes their identity. Kids that becomes their filter, that becomes their experience, are much less likely to kind of eschew critical thinking. They're much more likely to look at a situation for what it is and be able to evaluate it and then make a decision based on the information that they can kind of ascertain, as opposed to just what
Going
somebody
with
is telling them.
else says or does. Yeah, absolutely. How does, obviously martial arts is one option for an adult who didn't get these lessons as a kid, who doesn't understand how to control the internal, control the external, have these conversations, have their own identity and thought processes. So coming into martial arts where it's encouraged in that dynamic is one way. I would argue probably most group sport type interactions can have a similar thing. There's plenty of wrong ways to do this stuff, of course, but with the right coaching, the right guidance, a lot of that gets built. What are other ways adults can build that within themselves?
Yeah, I want to go back to martial arts just for a second, though, because
well, how dare you?
That can be one of the cultiest things that there is. You see it all over social media. My kung fu is better than your kung fu, kind of thing, and you don't even know what my kung fu is. So I think, kind of like you mentioned with sport, so much of it just depends on the coach, the instructor. If they're not coming at it from a place of being open-minded and willing to seek out other ways, other methods, other approaches to coaching or applying or whatever, then it's just another cult, really. Now, in terms of other ways of going about this, it's kind of like we've talked about previously. The people around you, your community, the people that are closest to you, if they are not of open minds, if they are not of diverse backgrounds, then the odds of you getting there are pretty slim. We create echo chambers in a lot of different ways, whether it's the neighborhoods we live in, the churches we go to, the clubs that we join, whatever, the social media groups that we get attached to. We create these echo chambers. And so if I want to become more adaptable, if I want to have this kind of ability to speak up for myself and to think critically and whatever, then I need people around me that, one, will support that. And two, that are like that. It's the whole, the 5 closest people to you, that's your
influence.
And so if the 5 closest people to you think like you do, then the odds of you doing anything other than that are pretty negligible.
I went to a bunch of different denominational churches as a kid, and I wasn't doing it intentionally to go try other things. It was just a friend would invite me, and like, why not? And we were on a cruise the other week, and I took a Zumba class, which I felt like might not be for me, and I took it, and I had fun. It's not for me, but now I understand why and how, and I can say for certain, I gave that a shot, and I understand why some people like it, and I also understand why I don't. But being willing to try different things, experiment with different things. And I do that from the coaching standpoint. I experiment with different types of drills, different things. Sometimes I tell the class, all right, you're my guinea pig on this one. Sometimes I don't. I just go for it and see where we land. That's how I get feedback on what works well, what doesn't. You create drills at the drop of a hat, give it to people. It either helps or it doesn't. And you get feedback on that based on how they interact with the drill and learn from it.
Even me watching the Zumba class, I had takeaways.
As soon as I was done, we had a whole conversation
from the small little subliminal stuff that happens in the music to the way that the instructor presents. Like, there's some brilliant stuff happening in there that has built the Zumba culture. So I get it. Like, I not that I didn't get it before, but I actually get why now.
That.
They have done a brilliant job of creating a thing that people want to be a part of, and then they reinforce it through some very clever means.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's look at Zumba and my decision to quit before I start, because I know, not difficult like physical strenuous, but it's difficult, it's physically demanding, but also there's weird moves, and like that's just not where I want to put my time and energy working on. And so I already know, like, I would go do a Zumba class with a friend. If they were like, hey, come do this class with me, I'd be like, sure. But
this is me and rock climbing, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, okay. I understand that now. But yeah, I have chosen to quit before I start, because I know I'm not going to push through. Even if I was doing a bunch and I was feeling good, I know at some point it's going to get hard. It's going to be challenging. I'm going to drop into that dip, and I'm going to quit rather than stick through it and be the best Zumba dancer. Is that a thing? I don't know. The best exerciser in the world. So,
that's CrossFit.
Oh, dang it. Well, what's Zumba got? See, it wasn't even worth it to stay. Everybody should quit Zumba because there's nothing on the other side of that dip. It's a cliff. You can read about cliffs and cul-de-sacs in the dip. Anyway, one tool for deciding in advance when to quit, other than just knowing yourself. He references an ultra marathoner who uses this strategy, because, in the moment is not the time to decide if you're going to quit or not. You'll always want to quit. There's a General S. Patton quote, what is it? Hang on. I got this.
It's essentially the mind will quit before the body quits.
There you go. Yeah. The mind will quit before the body quits. Thanks. That's what I said. So anyway, in the moment, when you're tired, when the weather is bad, when your legs hurt, when all of the elements feel against you, and that's what you're focusing on, it's easy to decide to quit. So his strategy is to decide when to quit before he hits that discomforting point. And if it's something like marathons, ultra marathons, something that you do regularly and understand what it feels like, you decide, okay, if I hear a loud pop and I'm limping, maybe it's not worth it to limp my way to the finish line to get that time, or whatever it might be. Because
he's no David Goggins.
He is no David Goggins. David Goggins does not have that. You have to decide for yourself. Everybody has their quitting point.
David Goggins doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Two schools of thought. I have no idea.
I like watching David Goggins parody videos.
Good.
They're the best. I don't watch his videos, but I watch the
parody videos. That's fair. That's how I feel about Jocko.
Yeah, same.
Do you do basketball anymore? Do you play basketball?
No.
Why not?
Because I'm an old white guy.
Because the risk is way less than the reward at this point.
The risk is way more than the
reward. Way more than reward at this point.
I think the last time I played is when I blew out my ACL. So yeah, I'm good.
Yep.
I enjoy it. It's a lot of fun.
You'd still mess around and grab a ball and shoot.
I thought about it while we were on the cruise.
I knew it. I felt it.
But yeah, it's just not worth it.
It's not worth it. So you decided
not especially with a bunch of teenagers, because I don't have that. Like, once I'm in that moment, I would just die there.
Yep.
You know, like I would be getting tossed into the ocean as my final resting place, because I'm not gonna just quit with a bunch of teenagers.
Yeah. Because you're hurt.
Who I am. Yeah.
I know. So you decided to quit, and you quit ahead of time. Well, kind of. It did take an ACL tear, but still, I think that was a smart strategy. And that's when, again, the difference of quitting in this manner versus giving up because something's hard is using quitting as a superpower, as a strategy, rather than an emotional reaction.
Yeah, it's an ROI.
Yep.
Which we're constantly making all day, every day. And I think we probably get more wrong than we do right as humans.
Yeah. We have to figure out when it makes more sense to stop than continue to stick it out. And that's physically with our bodies. That's our beliefs. And it's our political beliefs, our trust in celebrities, in fighting, in everything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, definitely stop if the aliens don't show up. It's probably time to stop.
It should be so clear, but it is not.
Yeah,
I will say, so this was interesting to me, and I didn't have time to go down too far down this rabbit hole. Right after they didn't show up and everything, they were still hardcore believers. Like our belief, divine intervention, they saved us. They were good with that. Mm-hmm. A few months out, it had fizzled. It was gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because deep down they know.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you just don't want to admit it. You don't want to admit it to yourself. You don't want to admit it to other people. I see people arguing on social media all the time about, again, I keep going to politics just because it's in America right now is just kind of everywhere. And I am more apolitical than I've ever been in my life by far. But I will read some arguments and I have to believe that these people know they are full of shit, but they are so invested that they can't admit it to themselves or admit it to other people. It's the aliens. If somebody keeps telling you a thing and that thing does not materialize or the opposite thing happens, it's time to stop carrying water for them. There's nothing wrong with, and maybe it's just on one subject, one topic, one concept. There's nothing wrong with policing your own, calling out. Like, not only is there nothing wrong with it, that is what should happen. That's how systems get better. That's how organizations get better, teams get better, humans get better, relationships, whatever, is recognizing, okay, as a whole, I'm 95% with you, but this 5% right here could really use a lot of improvement. And if you're not willing to make that adjustment, then you're saying I'm okay with this not being okay. It's whatever you allow will continue.
When you don't make a decision, that's a decision kind of thing. And we talked about that when you were like, I don't even 100% back myself.
No, I might say something here today that tomorrow I'm like, you know what? Maybe I was wrong about that. And I'll say it next time we're on here. I don't have a problem with that. Now, right in the moment, I might, immediately have a visceral, emotional reaction response. But I'm pretty good about sitting back and taking a look at it and then acknowledging that I'm not feeling that way now. That I looked at it wrong. I got, bad information, or I understood it incorrectly or whatever.
Recognizing your own bias comes in with that too. Like the seeker's cult,
which we all have.
Yeah. The seeker's cult had invested so much. They were all in on what they believed and thought, and that all or nothing is a dangerous line to track. And we're seeing that in the fighting space right now with this reinvigoration of the ecological training method, where this thing has come up and people are all in on it. It's this way or no way. This is the only way to do it. And that's just not intellectually true. That's not how people develop and learn.
Well, I mean, the funny thing about that whole debate is the ecological side, which in my own training, my own coaching, I'm much more that way. Right. That's much more how I learn and how I coach. But those people generally, and this is just, my experience from what I see, they have this kind of free-flowing, open-minded approach to training, but they are the most closed-minded when it comes to the conversation about ecological versus progressive resistance, or whatever you want to call it.
Again, they are all in. Like, this is the only thing to do.
People put it in their bios. Like, I had a guy post something on my Instagram. It was like 8 sentences long. Somebody I'd never heard of before. And I just responded with cool. Because I'm not, if you start trying to have a debate with me about the Bible and I'll click on your Instagram bio and there's a Bible verse in there, I'm not going to engage, because what's the point? You're not coming to me as an honest broker and wanting an actual conversation. You're wanting validation, you're wanting to be heard, whatever, but you're not wanting to listen. So I'm not gonna engage in that. But with this particular topic, and we talk about this in coach courses, nobody learns the same way. Like, there are different types of learners. You're much more a progressive resistance kind of person.
Very much so.
I am one of the worst drillers known to mankind. I am horrible at like A, B, C, D, E, F. I am not a paint by numbers kind of person at all.
Will not follow instructions.
Horrible, terrible. And so I'm much more on the ecological side personally. But I can recognize that is not how not only everybody learns, but probably most people learn. I think to do it properly, there's a combination of both approaches. One may be more heavily weighted based on a person's personality and their means of learning. But I think applying both is important. In the book, I have a section on this, and I talk about this kind of progression: build, adapt, and test. And it's kind of like, I'm gonna lay a foundation, lay a groundwork, give them, or build, test, adapt. Sorry, put them in a situation where we have to test it, and then let them adapt. And if they're not adapting, then we go back to build. Right?
Yeah.
We go back to drilling. We go back to the fundamentals, the basics. It's like if I took a 13-year-old kid that had never been by water before, and I just throw him in the deep end,
let's see how
it's
what
probably not going to be a great result. But if I give him some fundamentals, some basic ideas, even if it's just how to not panic, then the odds of him at least surviving are much greater. But if I want to take that same kid and make him an Olympic swimmer, he's not going to be able to just figure that out. I don't care how much time he spends in the pool. I don't care how many laps he swims. He's not going to be able to just figure out, just adapt, just problem solve his way to Olympic gold. That's not how it works.
Maybe if you had 70 years.
Even then.
Yeah.
He's never going to figure out what got Michael Phelps to where he did. Michael Phelps had great coaches that broke down every kind of stroke, how to do this, how to breathe, they didn't just throw him in the water and be like, hey man, you got good bones, you're built for this. Figure it out.
Yeah.
I promise that's not what happened.
Yeah. And it's true for everything from learning math to organic chem to shooting a basketball. You need a foundation to work from.
Listen, at the highest levels of whatever professional sport, they run plays that they have practiced. X's and O's. We put people in these spots and we drill that and we drill that and we drill that. We don't just say, here's a ball, go. Like
every time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, are there transcendent people? Yes. Give Michael the ball, get everybody else, get the fuck out of the way.
Yeah.
Yes, that happens. But they also drill how to get Michael the ball.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about, like, this came up for us with shooting, and Magno likes to talk about this a lot, where when you first learn to shoot, you find a good stance that's comfortable and that helps you build the structure you need to take the shot and make the bullet go where it's supposed to go. But at high levels, you don't need to have that stance to shoot. But you can't just skip from learning the stance and shooting to, well, I can stand however I want and let me just learn to shoot. Yeah. It's still a progression.
Yeah.
And
the ecological approach for a beginning firearms student would be terrifying.
Here's the gun, shoot it that way. Like, that would be awful.
Here, figure it out.
Yeah.
No, that's not how people learn. It's a piece of it, I think. I think to have optimum performance, you need both approaches.
Yeah.
And people can disagree with me all they want. I don't care. That's fine. I know what's right.
I mean, I felt that in my striking development because I did traditional martial arts growing up. So I knew how to stand and kick and punch to some degree. And then as I moved into Krav Maga, I learned a little bit more protective measures for punching and kicking and doing these things. But I was never really taught to fight. It was just touch, hands, go. Yeah. And so I threw these things that I had learned, but I had no idea how to create combinations.
Right.
Because I had never learned making combinations.
Yeah.
And even though now I train jab, cross, hook, low kick or whatever it is, doesn't mean I touch hands and that's all I throw or whatever, but it helps give me a platform to work from that I didn't know existed before.
Yep.
Because it was here, hit this pad as hard as you can for as long as you can. Okay, cool. Put on gloves, do that to a human. Oh, by the way, the human's doing that back to you.
Right.
And I was like, this sucks.
Right. Listen, I've cornered, 20 plus fights probably. And there are people that when you're in the corner, you're there as a timekeeper and maybe to throw on an ice bag, end swell or something.
Yeah.
And then there are other people that, you're coaching throughout and they are listening to you and you're giving them cues. And that's just how humans are, know. The people that don't really need corners too much, they're much more on the ecological side of things. You
Yeah.
know, the progressive resistance people, they may not necessarily see in real time what's happening, but if they've got a coach that's seeing it and is delivering that information to them, they can
I
take that
got it.
information
Yeah.
and do something with it.
Yep.
You know, I rolled yesterday for the first time in a while. 2 rounds, very light. I'd hesitate to even call it rolling, really, but I felt really good rolling. And you know, afterwards, you know, I kind of played back in my mind a couple of little things. How I got there, no clue, no idea. Like if you had to ask me right now how I did this, that, or the other, I couldn't tell you. But I've also rolled with people that could give you back play by play, inch by inch, angle by angle, what not only what they did, but what
The other
the
person
other
did to
person did.
facilitate that.
You
Yeah.
know, and so just to be so bought in to one way of doing things, you know, again, whether it's politics, religion, coaching methods, whatever, I think really limits your ability to grow.
And especially if you haven't tried different options and
Mhm.
varieties. And then there's a whole different thing again when it comes to the individual versus the coaching level.
Yeah.
Maybe you are wholly bought in on the ecological approach for you, but still recognize progressive resistance is important for others.
Right. Yeah. As a coach, I think
You
being
got to be
all
able to
in
do it
on one
all.
side or the
Yeah.
other is just, you know. Now, you might get good results, but are you getting good results because people that also think like you are the ones that
ones
stay in your
staying.
gym? You know, because if I only coach a certain way, that's going to be reflective in my student base.
Yep.
Right. The people that don't learn that way are not going to stay. They're not going to stick around, you know. And so I've created my own echo chamber. I've built in my own confirmation bias because I look around my center and I'm like, look, all these people are they've done the ecological approach. They're
great.
crushing it.
Yeah.
They're fantastic. Yeah, but what about all the
But I
people
didn't
that came
stay.
and didn't stay because they couldn't learn your way? You know?
Yeah. I like details.
Yeah.
And I know that can be to a detriment.
It's
20
like
years
anything.
in my
It's
training.
like anything.
So I know to go for
Two
it. but
extremes.
yeah. Like if this resonated with you, failed prophecies, aliens, or fighting and ecological approach, share your ideas, share your story with us, share it with a friend. But that is our look at fighting, fans, and failed prophecies. If you enjoyed this discussion, please leave us a 5-star rating. Go check us out on Spotify, YouTube. Hit play in the background while you're doing something. Help us get those views and follows. If you didn't enjoy this podcast, I don't know how you could possibly not enjoy this. Overreact, comment on everything we've ever posted, how awful it is. And we look forward to growing with you next time.
My turn.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody.